All right, welcome to the Spiritual Gentleman Podcast. This is a space where we uncover stories of resilience, transformation, and spiritual growth. Today, I'm truly honored to have a remarkable guest with us, Baba Sam Shelley, also known as the Miracle Man. Baba Sam's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. From overcoming a severe accident at the age of 6, from battling multiple disability conditions like undiagnosed bipolar, multiple sclerosis, arthritis for decades. Life seemed like an uphill battle, but then something happened. He had a miraculous thing happen and a spiritual realization that transformed everything. Now, today, Baba Sam is a beacon of hope. He inspires people to clear their mental clutter and embrace their divine essence. A life where miracles are an everyday occurrence. He's an author, a spiritual teacher, and a healer who's dedicated his life reminding others of the infinite possibility and potential of our souls. Welcome, Sam, to the podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Dave, it's great to join you today. So who are you talking about before? I'm not that person anymore.
This is what I took from your bio. It's always, I love doing intros because it's a great way of seeing ourselves when we kind of put ourselves out there. Because I have a hard time, I'm not sure about you, but I find the self has a hard time recognizing self, especially when I see my good qualities. So when someone says them to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that imposter syndrome. I'm like, no, embrace it. I read your story. It's an amazing story. So tell me, this kind of particularly the accident that happened at 6 and how that kind of shaped your life.
Because at age 6, run over by a van. It was the last day of first grade. You hear the familiar music, at least in the United States, you hear the familiar music of the ice cream truck. And then you beg your parents for money. Then you run out, you get your ice cream. But after I got my ice cream, I was coming around the ice cream truck, and there's a van speeding down the road. And I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't get out of the way. And I always used to feel a little guilty, blame myself that I saw this van coming. Why couldn't I get out of the way? I learned later in life that the skill of avoidance is a really complicated skill that we learn at 17, 18. So that's why, unfortunately, a lot of kids that are 6, 7, 8 years old get hit by a car because they don't have the skills of avoidance. They can't move out of the way. So, yeah, so I had that accident, and it was really dramatic. And, I had the head injury, the broken elbow, the broken hip, and spent nearly a year in the hospital. And what that really did for me, because at these really young years, that's when we're developing all of our social skills. So I was really taken away from that. So I was always a little awkward in school because I didn't know how to relate with people. And what they discovered in today's societies, kids that experience these brain injuries at young ages have a tendency to develop bipolar and some other issues. They can definitely do a correlation between accidents, from when we're young to adults. You can see there's a tendency for bipolar to come there because it really does, change the brain chemistry. So it really created my bipolar and recovering from that. But it was really an undiagnosed bipolar because when I was growing up, is like they pretty much look at the body for the most part as a machine. They didn't really look at your stress, your worry, because I was really, shy, stand backish and just really I'm really being hard and critical on myself. That was a lot of part of my journey too. And then when you're hard and critical on yourself, the body starts attacking itself. So then you start getting autoimmune diseases. So then it just becomes a spiral. And no one knew how to get out of that spiral because we're more than just this body, this machine. There's a human element to it, our emotions and those things that really shape our life.
I love that because it's really one of the ways I like to break it down is okay, yeah, our body is a mechanical wonder. The fact that we can do all these things and move and but there takes something else, the essence of what that is, right? That's the hardware. The software is the soul, is the mind, is the thing that makes it, that gives it life. I love to always break down the difference between craft and art, right? Craft is someone's ability to put their skill of all right, I was a chef for many years, so I can cook an egg the exact way, but to make that egg into art or to turn anything to art is you put your soul into it, you put your emotion, you put the values into it. That's what makes us human. And I relate to your story as well because I have ADHD, and understanding that the being hard on yourself, the extra criticism, not that constantly feeling that you're out, and especially when your brain chemistry is not it's in a different system than everyone else's. You experience life in such a different way. So this is something how did bipolar affect you, especially in those teen and growing up years of like, especially undiagnosed? How did that like was really curious on that kind of experience.
Yeah, so it was really a strange experience because I could be in my class, really quiet, really laid off, really stand backish, to sometimes just arguing with the whole class over something trivial. So I was later diagnosed as a rapid cycler, which means you go from like these really low lows to really highs very quickly. So I could be in that state where I'd really be quiet, sad, kind of standoffish to like seeing something that I didn't agree with and just argue with the whole class over it. It was just really this duality that I was living in. And one time when I was really acting up, they sent me to the principal's office. He literally asked me, "Are you smoking marijuana?" I said no, and he sent me back to class. That was the extent of my help.
Oh wow, and that's it's such a thing too because of like kind of like I'm glad now that I think when kids are now going through it, hopefully that they're getting a bit more help in schools than we had when we were growing up because it's one of those things, especially now that I live in Ireland, like the Irish Catholic culture of like, yeah, no, we don't talk about it. Nah, they're just kind of like we're not gonna like let's not broach it. And it's only in the last maybe 5-10 years is like no, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about these things. How do like finding ways of improvement. So I'm curious, what was kind of like that turning point for you of like, so you're struggling with these kind of things throughout your life, and then what kind of was that? What was like the biggest struggle? What was that for me? You have those moments. Like, what was that moment that kind of transformed or changed everything?
Yeah, because nothing really transformed me at that time. I was eventually diagnosed in my 20s when I was very depressed, suicidal, and those kind of issues. But the big flip that happened to me was after the multiple sclerosis and losing the ability to walk. So I lived with MS for 7 years, multiple sclerosis, and it was really in this progressive decline. So it was getting worse and worse with the MS. But I can really see that it was actually a blessing in disguise. Of course, we can't see that in the midst of it when you're losing the ability to walk. It's like, how's that beneficial? But we can always look at it back in hindsight because as a bipolar, I could be depressed to manic very quickly. Even with the medicines, they stabilize that. But still, you get these little craziness that you do as a bipolar, like driving 100 miles per hour down the highway or some kind of extreme behavior. So what happened with the multiple sclerosis is I could no longer run around. I became disabled. I had to deal with me. I had to deal with everything that I was going through with. So there's no more escaping. With bipolar, you can always do something to escape, to numb the pain, to do whatever. But when you lose that ability to walk, it really changes everything. So at this time in my life, I was a couch potato. I was disabled, I really couldn't do much, so I just used to watch a lot of TV. So I used to watch ghost hunting shows, but I didn't know if it was real or fake because it's TV. I didn't know what to make of it. So it's like, but I saw a tweet from a ghost hunter saying, "Hey, we're going to have this event in Philadelphia." It's like, oh, I can go to that. So so that was a real adventure for me. Traveling was an adventure. It just requires lots of things to travel with multiple sclerosis and heat. It really is hard to function with MS. So I was able to go to this ghost hunt at Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia. And so from that experience, well, of course, I could only go for a little time because of MS and fatigue and all these issues. So I was doing my research on this location. It's like, oh, this area supposedly has the most action. We're going to go there and see what happens here. So I had a few things that happened when I got to this space, but the one that really sparked my curiosity, really got me to go like, aha, there is something to this. So I was sitting on this bench and I felt somebody sitting next to me that wasn't there. So I actually felt somebody sit next to me that wasn't there. Then once they sat next to me, I just felt this overwhelming sense of dread come over me because in this area it was used as a prison for Civil War prisoners. So when this person sat next to me, I just felt a sense of dread. It's like, oh, that's curious. So I left that event. So most people would have just discounted like, oh, okay, it was just an experience and we let it go. But I was curious, like, what did I experience here? There's something to this ghost hunt. There's something to this. So I was always naturally curious. So I was like, But with MS, my eyesight was extremely poor. And if I read too much, I would get migraines. I also had chronic migraines, really bad migraines that would send me to the hospital 2 or 3 times a year. So I could only read like 5, 6 pages, maybe 7 pages at a time. So it's like, okay, so who knows about ghosts? And what I understand is that mediums speak to dead people. Okay, let me read a book from a medium and see what this is all about. So I was just going through the book. Then they talked in the book about meditation, how they use meditation to get into that space or whatever. But as they were talking about meditation, they were talking about the benefits of meditation. Because at this point in my life, I was really stressed out. I was really overwhelmed with life. It seemed like nothing was working out. So one of the benefits of meditation that really jumped out to me was the inner peace. I'm like, I need inner peace because I was really stressed out and overwhelmed with life. I need inner peace. So there's all the benefits of meditation, but it didn't matter. That one benefit just jumped out at me like inner peace. Okay. There was really no instructions in this book. They literally spoke about meditation for 2 pages, the front and back page. That was it. So there was really no instructions, which was perfect. Because if you give myself with the bipolar OCD brain, someone with ADHD, all of these instructions, they're going to be like, am I
It's
doing this right? Am I sitting properly right?
Yeah,
Am
you're
I
just gonna
holding my hands right?
overanalyze everything. You're like, okay, is this step and this step, and then you're so in your own head about trying to do meditation that you're actually not doing I actually think that's kind of hilarious. I think that was so brilliant because I'm a fan of meditation. Of like, yeah, we're only gonna talk about it like the only essence you need is the last page, like first page, last page, everything else. That's the meat. Like meditation is
Right.
just
There's little,
being.
right. Basically the thing for meditation was sit quietly, put on relaxing music, and just relax. That basically was their instructions. I was like, I can do that. But I was also under the impression that meditation means you stop thinking. So I started with a 5 minute practice. So I would be sitting there and the mind would start going away, going. So it was like, oh, stop thinking. Mind would start going, be like, oh, stop thinking. So I was on this I was on this loop for about a week. I was about a week in this loop of thoughts chasing thoughts because I was under the impression that it was thoughts stop. But then I was like, wait a second. That's a thought chasing a thought. If I'm aware of my thoughts, then I'm not my thoughts. If I'm not my thoughts, who am I? So I sat with that question then was, who am I? So my practice at this point became, if mine was busy thinking, I would bring my attention back to my feet. I'd be like, where are my feet? And bring my attention back to my feet. That was my key. For some people, it's breath, it's nose, forehead, wherever, someplace in the body, they bring their focus back. But at this point, I was reading no spiritual books, no nothing. I just read those 2 pages on meditation. That was it. That was my spiritual journey. I wasn't spiritual before that. This ghost hunt just led me down this path. So I'm sitting there with this question, like, okay, who am I? And I just keep myself present. I was really learning mindfulness at this time, just keeping myself present. Like Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now, but I didn't read that book at that time. I was just really learning to be present because I later discovered I was never here in this moment. I was always entertaining the thoughts. So we're either in the thoughts or we're here. So I was bringing my attention back to my feet with this who am I question. And at this point, I upped my meditation to 5 minutes twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. That was my practice of just sitting quietly, doing my best to stay present, sitting with this question, who am I? So one evening after my meditation, I just simply heard a voice say, perfect spirit. I'm like, that's it. My spirit is perfect. It's simply the body and mind that are damaged. Then I just had a deep sense that all is well, and all sense of fear about my health just simply went away. It's just like everything just shifted in that moment when I heard that voice say perfect spirit, reminding us that everyone listening to this is a perfect spirit, soul, whatever you wish to call it. That greater essence within us is who we are, but we get identified with our thoughts, the body, thinking that we are the body and the mind and our identity and everything that goes with that. But I really heard that voice at the right time. If I heard that any earlier in my life, I would have been go see my psychiatrist, say, now I'm hearing voices and So I was actually at the right point in my life to hear that. And it was really the perfect time because the MS was really getting worse. Everything was really starting to go downhill. It was like when I heard that voice say perfect spirit, and I just simply knew it was all over. And then I say within about 14 months, no cane, no medicine, no doctors, nothing. It was all gone. But I knew at that instant it was done. So I don't recommend this to everyone. When I had that voice and I had that knowing that all is well, I just started taping my medicine off. I just started to follow my own impulse that it's time to cut back the medicine. And my doctors were freaked out when I said I was doing so. I stopped seeing my doctors. I don't need their opinions. I just felt this impulse within me. But I did keep my last neurologist appointment. I made one last neurologist appointment.
Sorry about that. I don't. We got popped down for a second there. Irish
Yeah.
internet is not the best. But no, continue on because it was so. I'm sorry. I was so enraptured. What a powerful kind of story, and I love when you're talking about that kind of moment, right? Because that voice, that perfect spirit, it's such a quiet, like you. It's so indistinct. It's for me at least when I hear like kind of the voice of spirit, it's different from any of the like talking heads ego voices in my head. It's that quiet faint but fills you with that energy that you're like, okay, I know. And it's that power of you're just like, oh, like, and I'm not sure about you, but have you ever felt because of like kind of all these things, like I have another really good friend of mine who's had a lot of like physical illnesses that have led him to stronger spiritual strength. When one or two of the kind of the trio is weak, the other one kind of makes up for it. Did you see maybe do you ever kind of felt that kind of experience of that stronger kind of pull of that kind of energy or more awareness to it?
Yeah, it was really unusual for me when I heard that voice say perfect spirit, my mind just grew really quiet. And that voice was like my own voice. It wasn't a whisper, it was just like a voice, but didn't have an opinion to it. It was like, do yoga, do this, do that. It was just very matter of fact that. So when I heard the voice say do yoga, the mind would say, you can't do yoga. You're not flexible. Your balance is terrible. I ignored it. I literally went to the yoga studio and signed up. I didn't give my mind a chance to circumvent that. So 6 months after doing yoga, there was no more cane. My balance was back to normal. So I just trusted that voice. I had that knowing that I don't recommend to people, but I just had that knowing that this was my path to wean off the medicine. And it took a while to wean off that medicine because I was taking 13 daily medications. I had about 7 diagnoses that were being treated. It was a lot of stuff. And I was probably over medicated because that's what they did back in the day. They just, oh, you got this, and they just keep piling things on. So I did make a neurologist appointment and my multiple sclerosis doctor because I had two neurologists, one for the migraines, one for the MS. Actually, I had two doctors for the MS and one for migraines. So with my MS, I saw my one neurologist for one last time. I did all the blood work and scans and all that before I would see him one last time. And he was puzzled. He said, your scans are clean. Your blood work is better than mine. I'm doing your physical examination. You have a non-specific hand tremor that everyone else has. So what did you do? And he questioned me for 45 minutes trying to quantify what I did. And he had no answer.
That is so awesome. I love when we can stump medical professionals because it's such a rigid, narrow way of thinking, right? Which kind of makes sense for medicine and for some points in medicine, yeah, it kind of makes a little sense. And others, without this broader view of taking in the totality of everything, especially when we're talking about things like MS, bipolar, ADHD, any neuro like diverse things, medication can help a little bit, but like if you don't have life stuff, you don't have all the other aspects to go along with it of how to deal and handle the world and the mental clutter and those kind of the inner stuff, you're not like I can give you as many pills as you want. It's not going to actually change anything. It's just going to make you a zombie.
Right. And which is really interesting because when I discovered that I had thoughts, but I wasn't my thoughts, then we talk about all the time I saw the psychiatrist, the psychologist, was all about reframing thoughts, but none of them actually said to me, why are you taking your thoughts as truth?
And it's funny too, because if you go back to even like Stoic philosophy, 2000 years old, talks about this a lot. I'm the big Stoic philosophy fan, but they talk about, of like, examine your thoughts. Like, is that factual, or is this your story that you're telling yourself, right? Or how much of this is story and how much is this like based on evidence? Like, one of the things I always tell my clients is like, all right, what does the evidence say? Because your ego is going to tell you something different, but what is the evidence? What is the like facts on the ground, things that you can touch say?
Right, exactly. It's really about that evidence. And it's not even reading the evidence from other people. It's what is your evidence? What's your reality? Because the stories, the facts outside there could be also some bias involved in them as well. Because there's always these pharmaceutical studies, the one that they show to publish and the ones they don't want to publish. They only give you the ones they want you to see. They don't want you to see the other stuff over here. So it's always, we have to realize that life is full of bias. And as long as that mind's in play, there's going to be bias. So it's, I tell individuals that you inhabit this body. Ultimately, you know it the best. Others are just going to guess or based on their past experience what might work for you. But if we start taking them, like for me, I always talk my doctor's word as the truth, that they're the medical professionals. They know what is best for me. They have an idea, but they don't actually inhabit your body and see what is correct for you. So that's where I'm really trying to help people is go beyond all this mental busyness and stories and really tune into you. What is right for you? And only you know what is right for you.
Exactly, right? It's one of the things of like in my coaching thing, I tell them right off the bat, I'm like, I don't have the answers. You have the answers. Our job is to dig deep within you and pull those out, to find the barriers, to find, recognize the biases. I kind of want to pull on that biases thread a little bit, because I think that's one that a lot of us get tripped up on, is right, understanding our perceptions. And I loved how you talked too about the third. I always call it like kind of the third perspective, right? Like you have multiple perspective, recognizing yourself of like the awareness perspective. You are not necessarily your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are a combination of everything in this third kind of perspective. So how do you handle and teach people to work through their bias, to catch their bias? What are some tools that we can use of like when we're even speaking to ourselves or to other people or in our actions, so we can catch our biases and like learn to take that moment to pause and catch? Is there any tools you have for that?
It's really the big key with this is to just stay present. Most of the time we aren't present. And that's one of the ways we can tell is that there's a bias there because we're either in the mind or we're in this deeper place in our spirit or essence, whatever you wish to call it. We can't be in both places. We can't be here and here. It doesn't work. So it's really about getting people to slow down, to pause, and just to really reflect. The Stoic philosophy, how much is this a story? How much is this my truth? And really trying to discern that this is my truth. And it's the way you do that is by learning presence, but be aware and to realize there's that intuitive voice within you, your instincts, your feelings, your gut reactions, and to follow that. So you might hear something outside of you that doesn't feel right to me. So it's not right for you. It might be right for 99% of the people, but it's not right for you. So you have to do that thing that's right for you. And it's really about slowing that down. So when I'm working with individuals, I don't try to do it from the mind space. I don't chase thoughts with more thoughts. I'm more going into a meditative type process where I'm doing this spiritual transmission, which is really taking an eraser to some of these beliefs, because I really want individuals to feel this deep, deep peace of spirit, of soul, because that's who they really are. That's always at peace, that all is well. So even when I work with meditators, they'll say to me, I've never felt a peace like that before, because I'm really rooting them into who they really are. And when they're rooted in this place, then you get more of these instincts, you get more insights on how to move forward. And it's learning to trust that voice. That's also a big thing, is that we've been taught not to trust yourself, that we don't know what's best for us. Oh, look at this shiny object over here. They're trying to sell you all this stuff that you really don't need. It's just like, my practice was very simple. 5 minutes twice a day. It's very, very simple. But the mind wants all these complexities, all these difficulties. And And that's also mind stuff. So when we're trying to discern what's the mental voice and this deeper essence, the deeper essence is just matter of fact, do that with no rhyme or reason. And the mind is saying, drink water to stay hydrated and all these benefits. No, it's just drink water. You don't need to worry about the reasons why. You just have that impulse to do that. The spirit told me to do yoga. I didn't sit there and figure it out. It's like, no, I just have to do yoga. There's no benefits to it. It's just like, do this. And I did that. And it's just, I keep things very simple, that I'm not one to chase thoughts with more thoughts. That's not helpful. So some people will describe a process a little bit like self-hypnosis, because I'm really trying to drop below the mind. And I'm just taking this energetic eraser to it as best I can do it. And that's what you see through these spiritual teachers, like Baba, like these spiritual teachers are doing this transmission. They're just trying to bring in this divine quality, this divine essence, and just washing that over you, because that is the energy of us, that it's ultimately one energy and everything originates from this one energy. Whatever you wish to call it, universe, source, that which can't be named. It's just one energy. We can't tell you where this one energy came from. The origin, where this came from, the mind can't know. It's just one of those things that the universe is here. I don't know any idea how it came to be, but here it is. I'm having this experience.
Yeah, it's funny because I always one of my mind blowing kind of ways I reconceived the universe, I have to say, came from watching the ending scene of Men in Black, the film of when he's rolling the marbles and the whole universe is inside the marble, and you're like, okay. And then there was another film I saw where they basically had like this um creature turn into like a whole like galaxy inside of it. And I was like, you know what? We're all just inside a larger organism. What if we were all just inside this grander organism, but it's covering the whole entire of all of reality of what we perceive, but it's something even grander than that. We're just all living within this with all the same energy, right? Because we're all interconnected. Baseline of everything, right? Is baseline in science. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed. So we're all made up of the same stardust as everything else. And it's funny too. I love how you talked about it's really so simple, right? It's really the simplest of things that and it's us that want to complicate the crap out of everything. And I think also in our society now, right? In capitalism, the idea is that you have to have the outside thing to fill the inside hole, right? Like, oh, you're feeling empty on the inside. We must take these outside things to fill the hole, but it never fills the hole because the hole can only be filled from the inside and goes out. And it's like recognizing that it comes from heard this phrase once, happiness or even peace. Peace and contentment are an inside job. They are an outside job. Outside forces aren't going to fill that. Sorry, I just kind of I was inspired there and was feeling and being in the moment.
It's really right. It's really that, to realize that we are one with everything, that there is no separation. The more you're in the mind, the more separated and alone you feel.
And so a question, because I know you've written a couple of books. In the process of writing those books, were you using a meditative process behind it? Was this kind of, I know I've heard some writers talk about of how like it's just kind of like, all right, they just felt the calling and just it kind of flowed out, or was it more of a struggle for you, or were you able to use these kind of principles into the writing aspect as well?
Yeah, so I never planned out my writings. Some authors will have an outline and have a little summary of each chapter they want, and they'll write the pages to fill that. Mine was just a complete and organic process. Here's the one chapter, here's the next, and it just flowed out. And so the first book, I had a traditional publisher. That means you give them the manuscript, they buy it from you, and then they give you royalties. The second book was self-published, and that's a lot more involved, and it's really you getting the word out there as opposed to a publisher. So it's really about this unfolding. So the first book came about because people were asking me, what did you do? What was your process? The thing was the secret. They just saw me going from the sick disabled man to suddenly healthy in the best shape of my life within 2 years. So what happened here? And it was like, yeah, just explaining my story and how simple it was. And it was simple because I never had a spiritual teacher. If we talked about before, you give somebody with OCD, ADHD, and you give them 100 pages on how to meditate, they're not going to get out of their mind. They're going to be, am I doing this right? Am I doing this properly? So for me, the greatest blessing was curiosity. What did I experience in that paranormal event? And that got me to read about meditation. It just sort of unfolds if you're really aware of this moment and just paying attention and just, I think that's probably one of the things that we're really lacking. I'm seeing a lot now is curiosity. Stop, instead of taking things at face values, why is that true? Yeah, literally 100,000 people are saying this, but why is that true?
Yeah, no, I find it, this is one of the, especially when I was more in the dating coaching thing too, but I think just overall of like human beings not being curious about one another, in the sense of like, oh no, this is my stance, that stance. Okay, but why? And like I had a guy I was working, and he was like, oh man, I always get kind of bored with people. I'm like, do you ever get curious about them? Have you ever just tried to apply curiosity and like understanding of like what makes them tick and try to bring out interest, right? Because it's one of those things, if you have no interest, especially as an ADHD person, because we have an interest-based nervous system versus an importance-based nervous system. So like we only will do things that we're interested in or challenging, or that's the modes. And if we're not interested, but it's we don't do it. We just like we flow with it. But I'm sorry, I lost my point there. But I was gonna get to the recognizing our of having that kind of spiritual balance. Have you ever felt that you've gone kind of maybe how do you have you taken these applications to day-to-day life, and how would you like, so we know we got the 5 minutes a day, was there anything else in the process that like came out? And also, actually what I really want to get to is we talked about curiosity and I consider that one of the values. What are like two or three other values that you hold to yourself of like curiosity, honesty, openness? What do you think are great for a spiritual practice?
To question everything, not to take things at face value. That's pretty much one of the, it's also a very big Stoic philosophy is not just taking things at face value, is to like, is that your truth? And my practice is very simple. Even today, I don't sit for very long. I can sit in meditation for hours, but I'm here for the human experience. So it's really about keeping yourself present in this moment and really understanding when you're present, you're powerful. And when you're in your mind, your story, you're making yourself weak. You're actually lowering your immune system when you do that because the mind, busy mind, will be all stressed out in flight mode and increasing the cortisol within the body. And we just got to stay chill and just to relax and to realize that nothing's happening to you. The universe is not against you. That's probably one of my values is stop being a victim of life, to realize that nothing is happening to you, that everything is here for your benefit. And you may not be able to see the benefit at this point. When I was losing the ability to walk, I couldn't see the benefit of that until later in life. I could see, oh, that forced me to slow down, to go within, because all of our answers are within us. And to realize, as we were talking before, is that you are the answer you seek. The answer is within you. No one can give you that. So it's to really slow down and to understand that I don't like this reality that I'm living right now. So what's going on with me? Why are all these things presenting themselves? How am I influencing this life to cause these circumstances that I would not prefer? And to realize that life is simply a blank slate. And it's their mindset that is really locking in reality, is that we can always flip the script if we're willing to just pause, stop, and just say, what's really going on here? How do I want to live my life? Because it is my life. I'm here for this human experience. It's not about, all this busyness and all this doing. It's really about inspired action, doing those things that feel right to us and not getting caught up in the rat race of life and the hamster wheel. And there's just too much chasing. We're just not taking time for itself. So that's another thing for me too, is taking time for ourselves, to carve out some time. And this is really hard for parents, for mothers that are running a household. But even you take 1 to 2 minutes just for yourself, or maybe you just take your family chores and taking care of the kids as a mindfulness practice of just being fully here and aware of exactly what's going on and not into the story, into the autopilot that we can get ourselves into. It's so easy to get into autopilot. And everybody that drives can relate to this. We've drove ourselves someplace, but we have no idea how we got there. It's because the subconscious drove us there and the mind was off into the weeds. And if you just learn it when you're driving, just to stay present, turn off the radio and just focus on the steering wheel, focus on the little bumps and stuff in the road, and really, come into that space of being present with that. We're always trying to escape this moment, but if we're just fully here in this moment, we can shape reality to our preference. But if we're just up here in the mind, life is going to be chaotic and messy. It's going to match your mind.
I love that too, because like one of my mindfulness practices, because I was a chef for about 20 years, is being in the kitchen. So anytime I step into a kitchen, especially when I'm cooking for family, it is all senses are engaged. And I love this of like when we talk about, I think mindfulness, people think of like, oh, you're just mindful. Like, no, feel your senses, feel everything around you, like smell it, taste it. Like I get so into the moment of like the food and the energy I'm putting in there to put out this meal for the family and like and just kind of like and it's funny because things become then the hyper focus kind of kicks in too where and it's a meditative hyper, it's not erratic or like a fight or flight, it is a complete presence of the moment where everything kind of just flows so naturally and the smells and everything, things taste better, like it's they sentence the senses become heightened and like usually that's when I know my best dishes are. When I was a chef, anytime a chef and one of my cooks was angry, you went outside. I'd make you go smoke a cigarette, go crack some plates, get out that anger or aggression because I'm not letting you put your anger and aggression into my food serving out to my guest. It was one of those things of where like I started to try to apply mindfulness practices and especially energy transfer practices of especially I think for anyone who is in the field of helping or like for me in the food service industry, I do 10,000 different, the ADHD, I'm child entertainer, I do all kinds of different things. But like with everything I do, I'm all right, how can I be present and in the moment for it, right? How can we be here and recognize that this is the only moment I'm alive, right? This is the moment of like, if I can take this moment and just be here, this is the moment of now, right? That Eckhart Tolle tells us about. Like everything else doesn't matter. It's this moment of being present. And when you hit that moment, it's just so powerful. Um, yeah. I want to know, do you have any new projects or anything else on the horizon or anything you want to share with the audience?
So the only thing I really work on is my business beyond head trash, and really it's really about going beyond all this busyness and stepping into what I call the vibrant soul. That we're here full of energy, of light, and if we can just get rid of all this mental interference, the mental noise, and just go within and see what is your truth. I'm not here to be I don't want like all these big followings and think that I know what's best for you. Come to me for a little bit to help you remember who you really are. Then go step into your own spiritual sovereignty. Go create that life that you want to create, and just come back once in a while if you need a reminder. But I'm just here to remind you of who you are beyond your identity, beyond this female identity, whatever it may be, and just really embrace yourself because we're making it too complicated. And I see even a self-development space is just too much, do this. And it's like, no, stop doing with all the doing and just focus on you and just the simple mindfulness practice. You don't need all these routines and processes and making things more complicated again. And it's really just falling into that business model. I'm sure that people mean well, but they're trying to keep food on the table, but there's other ways to do it. They don't have to keep getting people to buy more and more stuff. It's just like help people step into their power, and then life will take care of itself.
It was the I'm trying to remember the phrase. It was the nope, completely lost it. I had it there for a second and then it gone. So we're just gonna let it go. No, but I love the idea of the head trash because when I first was looking at your website, it reminded me back when I was In college, I went and saw this comedy show, this dude who opened for Dave Chappelle, and he talked about this a very similar concept of, he said, like, when you're a kid, you just like, people keep throwing shit in your dumpster, right? And it just fills up your dumpster and your dumpster, and everyone just keeps throwing shit into your dumpster. Then you take your shit and you throw it into someone else's dumpster, and that shit gets thrown in another dumpster and another dumpster, and all it keeps gets reconciled, but it's all just shit. And I love what you say too about taking those moments to just slow it down, right? We're not human doers, right? We're not called human doers. We're human beings, right? It's learning how to it's in the name, just be. Once again, the
Yeah,
simplest things are probably the hardest why is this? Why is the simplest kind of thing usually the hardest thing to do?
because we've been taught, conditioned, programmed that life is difficult, and
But
it doesn't have to be difficult.
it doesn't. It does not have to be difficult. Awesome, man. Baba Sam, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And this has been, I've been really finding this a really fascinating conversation. Do you have any kind of, two things before we go? So I don't know if you're into tarot at all or anything like that, but my fiance, she actually designed her own deck, her own oracle deck. Um, and I usually like to pick a card out of her deck. If you don't mind, would you like me to pick you a card? You can say no. Like, once again, I
Yeah,
go to the
that's
Stoic
fine.
principle.
I also do psychic readings and mediumship as well. It wasn't something I trained to. It's just that we all have this ability. If we get the mind out of the way, we're all one with all that is. We all have these abilities to be intuitive, whatever we wish to be, is psychic, a medium, just a matter of practice.
Absolutely, right? With anything, right? These are all skill sets as well, right? These are all things that it's a practice and a development within our intuition, learning how to connect with source, connect with that divine light. And I think the card that I pulled for you, I think is actually a beautiful card because you mentioned the exact phrase, failure is a blessing. I'll send you a picture, my little thing there is popping out there. But failure is a blessing, and I think that's exactly what you're talking here of going through your story with MS, of like how even through our failures, it's just a first attempt at learning. It's an opportunity to change and grow. I'll send you on the actual picture of the card and a bit of she has some journal question prompts I think you'd probably enjoy. But I don't know. I felt like, do you feel like that card was appropriate? I felt it was.
Yeah, yeah, it's just one of my words. I'm really mindful of language. I really don't prefer the word failure because there's all sorts of programming and stories behind it. I just simply call failure, it's feedback. Everything is feedback, and we need to be mindful of the words that we're using. Life is hard. I'm failing. I'm making mistakes. I'm really mindful of the power of our words and just say it's just all feedback. Life is neither good nor bad. It's all based on our perception and how we're interpreting that. So everything is just feedback. If it's not working to your liking, you look at it, you examine, it's feedback. Let's try a different way, a different path. But when I was in that space, life was a giant failure because nothing was working out because I didn't understand that I was taking my thoughts as truth. That when I was suicidal, it was always that voice that life is too painful, life is too difficult, life is too hard. And it's just, I was taking it as truth, and it simply wasn't the truth. Like I said, the psychiatrist and the psychologist never once told me, why are you taking your thoughts as truth? They just try to reframe thoughts. So that's what I talked about before. I'm not a fan of chasing thoughts with more thoughts and the typical life coaching. I'd rather go beyond the head trash and really step into your essence and guide you there and how to reframe and how to look at things and just to slow down to realize you are the answer you seek. You may not believe it because you've been taught not to trust yourself, that you don't know what is best for you. And Dave is here to help you, remind you that you are this truth that you seek. We cannot save you. You're here to save yourself if there's any saving to be done.
Oh, I love that. And I love that too. I'm so thank you for talking about language too, the power of our words, right? Of how we speak things and understanding that, right? Like, because I try to, every time I say fail to me now means first attempt at learning. I got that quote off an Indian prime minister, and he says, no is next opportunity. So it's like learning how to kind of like, no, I'm going to like take back my power. I'm not allow, and I'm going to make it work. And everyone out there has that within them too. And it's just pulling that out, cleaning off kind of all that stuff and allowing the light to shine through. Thank you so much. Do you have any other final thoughts before we sign off for this episode?
I'm just curious, just a personal curiosity question, because you were giving this label of ADHD. How are you letting go of that label and not allowing it to define you?
Well, it's interesting because it's one of those things of where there's a particular subset of group of people, but my goal is why I call myself the spiritual gentleman is to go past these labels of ADHD because these are all to me is we're just going into mental masturbation, the mental trash of like subcategorying and labeling all these different subhuman categories of everything else. Because if we pull out every single little like genetic anomaly in the human race, you'll have way more subclasses of human beings that don't make sense, right? We're human beings. How we express it, if we all have a similar form of expression as human beings are a tribe, right? We fall into this tribal kind of thing. So finding and understanding my tribe, because I just basically need to go to this tribe and be like, yo, guys, you have got some great superpowers within you, and your mind, you're allowing your mind to control you instead of you controlling and mastering your mind. And it sucks because I believe, and I don't know if this is true or not, but like some people like Michelangelo would have had been someone who have likely to have had these makeups because it is a genetic thing. So this is something that is found throughout about 5% of the human population, as with so many other things on those levels. And these are just your gifts, right? And everyone has a strength and a weakness. I can be really creative, but I can also be absent-minded because that's the duality of the nature, right? Recognizing the duality of all your gifts and weaknesses. Everyone has a gift and a weakness, and it's learning at your duality. And the word I like is finding balance or equanimity of being in equal balance of all things and recognizing that all things have their place and understanding your place within it, which goes back into humility, right? Of like understanding your humble place in the grander scheme of everything, and you only know your small part. One of the biggest things I try to teach people is like, you only know your small part, but there's something grander than out there. But just focus on you, right? You don't need to know, I don't need to know all the other things. I just need to focus on what's the 3 feet in front of me, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I like that analogy too, that we only know what's on our immediate environment, but the mind is constantly guessing, and it's really taking away our power because all we know for certain is really right in our immediate space. I have no idea what's going on the train right now or all these kind of things, and it doesn't really matter what's here. What can I control?
Yeah, it's one of the things too of being an American living outside the United States. Like, like I feel this kind of representation for our country, but it's like I get a constant ask about politics, and I don't want to go into the politics of anything because I'm not really a political kind of guy. But it's one of these things where it's like, how does that affect my day-to-day life, right? Like these are things that doesn't really like when I come down to my day-to-day life, these are the things that I want to like that I can control, right? I have a small little hula hoop around me. I can only control a small I can only control what's here, and I've tried to learn how to let go out of, and it's such a hard thing too, right? The ability to let go of the things that are not inside your control. And it's one of my biggest kind of continual journeys in my practice is just the power of letting go of things that I have no opinion on. I am learning how not to have an opinion about things. So I'm not on Twitter because I don't have an opinion.
Right, and just opinions are not truth anyway, so it's just an opinion from a perspective. So it's just enjoying this moment to the best of your ability and just controlling those things that you can control, which is very, very little that we can actually control. It's just really just seeing life and saying, I don't prefer this. How can I change it? What's the next step I can take? And that's just looking at what's the next step. And it's really interesting with politics. We have to realize we are the creator of our realities. Are you giving your power away? Are you standing in your spiritual sovereignty? I know there's someone that I heard about that when the presidential election was here, for every presidential election, they write in their name because I'm creating my reality.
I like that because it's like I want to be the president because I always find that stuff interesting because I think it comes down to again to our communities to how you handle your day-to-day life and understanding like this is love a lot of these like spiritual and deep concepts, but I always like to try to bring them right back down to how can this help me today, because in the moment of now, because this is the moment that I'm alive, and I can think, oh, what's going to happen next? But that shit doesn't matter to me too much. It's like, okay, what are the things of how I can serve those around me and following my purpose, my North Star of what I believe. And I could be right or it could be wrong, but it doesn't matter because it's just the journey and I learn along the way.
Right. And that just reminded me of something. Sometimes people are trying to plan and focus so much on tomorrow. Tomorrow may not come. I'm sure we've all known somebody was here one day and gone the next for no apparent reason that we are aware of, but they had an accident or whatever, and they're just not here today. And, I've had cousins that were my age or younger, there's were healthy, and one day they had a heart attack or they were shot or something, and they're not here anymore. So we're always in the future, we're trying to plan and get everything detailed, sorted, but it's like, just focus on this moment, enjoy this moment while you're having this human experience, because this human experience doesn't last forever. Your spirit will continue, but not in this form.
Yeah, and it's recognizing of the moment of now. Like, I read this book, Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I don't know if you ever read it.
Great movie too.
Been trying to find the movie online for years, but I always loved the line too. He says how there's no ordinary moments, right? That was one of the things that I always took from that book, was like recognizing that every moment of like life is extraordinary and unique. And I actually like Google Photos because I was going back and I was like, and I found like a photo from 9 years ago when I first moved over to Ireland, and I was surrounded by all these like kind of people on Grafton Street, and I was like looking good. And it was just like, and like looking back on that, because sometimes I forget shit, like I forget things happen, like because I try to stay so present that I forget or I'm not like aware of it, and then it like pops up, and then that whole memory comes back, and like the feeling of like the emotions I felt of those first few months of this in this new country in this whole new environment, and like as I'm like sitting in my cabin with my fiance, I'm like, oh wait, this is that same kind of thing, but in a new way, like, and embracing the uniqueness of all moments. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really good that there's no ordinary moments. The scene what I like the most from the movie, Nick Nolte playing Buddha, he has, I forget the student what his name was, but he's walking with his student, and his student is just going on about the story, how difficult life is and all these problems, and he just pushes him in the water. It's like, get back to this moment. He's like, why'd you do that? And he's like, got you back here.
Yeah, no, that was a great scene. And it's just sometimes you need those kind of things, right? You need to have this kind of like once in a while, life will give you kind of a slap on the face to be like, hey, like, yo, what's going on? Like, you still have free will and choice, but just giving you an option.
Yeah, you can keep, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, people keep wrapped up in their story and the challenges of the day. And the more you focus on those story, those challenges, they're going to stay sticky. They're going to stay in place. You're not going to let them dissolve, because whatever you focus on expands. That's one of the basic teachings of the universe. Whatever you focus on expands, to realize it's all energy. Where you're giving your energy, where you're giving your focus, because the universe is always saying yes to you. If you need this, it's like, I need money to pay bills. Well, the universe is going to say, yes, we're going to give you more bills. It doesn't understand.
It isn't saying you need money. It's saying you're saying more bills. So like, oh, fantastic. Here are more bills.
Yeah. And we need to be mindful what we're paying. If we, as opposed to having the mindset of like, I always have enough money to pay my bills. All my bills are always taken care of. It's easy to earn money. It's easy to do this. And it becomes an interesting life.
Yeah, it really does. Like, it's one of those things, like, personally, right? Like, I'm still struggling on kind of like in the part of the manifestation of money, but it's also, I'm realizing too, part of it is like, I'm just trying to put myself out there, right? I'm at this particular stage now of going through a career transition and through kind of this moment of, I'm getting married in the next 6 months, and I'm seeing these kind of transformations and kind of change that I'm going on. Yet I'm recognizing that wherever this ends up is exactly where I need to be. And as long as I have this kind of faith in like, I've got a safety blanket behind me that I know if that anytime I fall, I know they got the universe and my support network to catch me. So it's like, I can walk with confidence. It's scary at times. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there are moments that it's really scary, and like the emotions still come up, and like, it's still like, it's a daily practice, right? It's based on a daily the maintenance, the daily maintenance of my spiritual routine.
Right. It is that. It's just taking that simple little practice of just staying in your center, knowing the universe has your back and you have your support system. And we just need to let go of all this worry and stress because you're just going to get more worry and stress. It's once again where we focus on and just trusting life. And that's so hard to do because we're taught not to trust ourselves.
And it's funny. I always hated that phrase, like the grass is greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. The grass is greener where you put your attention into. And it's that focus
Right.
and attention. Like, what are you putting that energy and how you focus that energy? And it's, how are you focusing that energy, or is it going all over? Like, because I think that's one of those things that's in our control, of that part of our willpower, of how we choose to interact, how we choose to place it out there.
Right. Exactly. Just to realize you're the only gardener in your garden.
Exactly. Oh, I is the oh, I bam. I wish I could actually drop this, but it's expensive. But that was a mic drop moment right there. That, I feel like, right there. Baba Sam, thank you so much for sharing and having such a fantastic conversation. I really, really enjoyed this. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to check out Baba Sam's books. I'll leave all the links, comments, and for all this stuff. So definitely check him out and all his stuff. Once again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for everyone for watching. And with that, you guys have a great, if not better, day.
All right. Great.